us know that you're here. If you're on the replay, say hello. Let us know that you're watching the replay. So I guess we'll just kind of chat a little bit while we wait for people to join. So my cough might be a little bit worse than usual because of the smoke. Smoke is so thick here right now. I had pretty bad coughing fit yesterday, but I did go outside for a while. I probably should have worn a mask, but I didn't because I wanted to breathe the air, which was a mistake because the air is not clean enough to breathe right now. Actually, somebody posted that the air in Portland right now is it's like the worst in the whole entire world. Like even worse. Yeah, it's like the worst air quality in the world right now.
Whoa. So that must be heavy, like that you can't even breathe. And like for months now, or like weeks, we've been wearing these masks already. So I can only imagine how it must feel that you can't even breathe the air anymore, you know? It's like that next level thing.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty bad. So I think it's pretty fitting though that we're talking about fairies today because we're talking, the fairies are the protectors and keepers of the earth. And they're doing all of this work to take care of the earth and the plants. And there are fairies that are the fire fairies that are the ones, the salamanders that are, they call them salamanders. Actually, I don't know if I love that term salamanders because they don't really look like salamanders unless there's different types, and salamanders is one kind of fire fairies and there's other ones. But I see them as actual fairies that like carry, like I see them as like sparks of flame kind of, but they have like wings and stuff. So the fire fairies right now are very active in my area and all over the West Coast. And they are doing a lot of cleansing and cleaning of the earth. And they're doing their job. And I keep complaining about how bad it is here. And I just have to like remember, the purpose of all of this and that this is what is needed for the cleansing right now. And I was thinking about all of the other fairies. Hi, Nikki. All of the other fairies that are, the ones that nurture and take care of the plants, and the gnomes that are taking care of the earth, and like all the things that they're doing for this fire. Like, did they prepare and know that this fire was going to happen? I hear a yes, actually, when I say that right now. I didn't tune into this before, but I hear a yes that they did know this was going to happen. They were prepared for it, and they're able to leave this world, that like the physicalness of here, that not that they're physically fully present here, so they can just switch over more to their realm and not be so present in this, to allow that, so that they don't actually get harmed, because it's very uncomfortable. Like if you are mowing your lawn and a fairy is on the lawn and gets mowed, like it still hurts them, like it's not like I don't know how to explain it. Does it make sense to you?
It does actually. This is so funny because I was walking in the forest this morning and I came across like different types of mushrooms, and you have like the ones that like when you step on them they pop. And it's so funny because I was actually thinking like, oh, I need to really go on the side of them. And like I was like thinking in my head like, oh yeah, I can't squash them, because like they can be homes and everything. And it's funny because I remember thinking, oh man, when I was a kid I would just like stomp those because it was cool to like see them pop. And like now I'm so much more aware of like, yeah, these could be like houses for like beings, so we need to be careful in that way. So it's actually really cool that you bring that up.
Yeah, because it's like you're not physically fully present, but it's like a piece of them is here, and that piece of them that is here can be hurt, and they would just have to like withdraw to, I don't know, regenerate type thing. So yeah, so with the fires, it's like, well, what about all those fairies, all of the different beings? And of course, the animals are all trying to run for safety. Not all of them will get away, but it's, I don't know, it's weird to think about, you know, like that this all needs to happen, but it's hard to like look at it and be like, how is this good?
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, I can feel it. And sometimes I'm like, am I just like feeding into the drama? Do I just like the drama that I'm like, I feel like this happiness? And so I went into that. I'm like, what is wrong with me that I feel like I can feel that joyfulness? Well, maybe joyfulness isn't the right word, but I can feel like that positive part of this. That's a better way of putting it. I can feel the positive of this happening. And it's like, what is wrong with me? But they just remind me that it's because I know what is coming, and this is what has to happen for that to come, for everything that is to come for the new earth. So these big catastrophic events that are happening in the world are a part of everything else, and things have to get really, really, really bad in order for things to get good. And what these fires are doing is they're bringing communities together. People have to come together in order to get through this. They have to help each other. They have to have that support of others. They can't do it alone. They have to ask for help. They have to, people are showing up out of the woodwork. Hey, how can I help? What can I do? You know, everybody wants to help, and or a lot of people want to help. And so we see that coming together of communities and of people just reaching out and helping strangers. And that's what we are creating for the new earth, right? Where we have a new earth where people do that, where people are coming together, and where we have more community instead of separation.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And when you were talking, I was actually feeling into like the feeling of that the fire is actually like cleansing the land also. Like there's like leftover energy from like lifetimes before our lives, and then it just stays in that place. And like it's like the land is like cleansing itself, you know, and transmuting that energy so that something new can be built on it. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is definitely like a big cleansing that is happening for sure. I wonder why more people aren't jumping on. Oh, maybe somebody else has joined. The number went up again. Say hello if you're here. And we're talking about fairies today. So if you have questions about fairies, pop them below. Nathalie and I are going to share some of our own experiences and just different things about the fairies. So it's conversation style, but we'll answer you guys' questions about fairies as well. Hello, Christine. Awesome. So I will tell you guys a little bit about when I first became aware that fairies are real, and the universe was really like smacking me in the face over and over and over again, because I'm like, fairies are from our imagination. They're not real. And I grew up in a home where we weren't allowed to have an imagination. So I was never allowed to really pretend. I mean, I could play, but it was more about playing things that were real life. So playing like, playing, what do we call it when you like played, you had a family or whatever, or played restaurant, or, you know, like real life things, and not like, oh, I'm playing with the fairies. Like my imagination was never nurtured in that way. So I think like from a very young age, it was kind of just shut down around things like that. So it took me a while, and I first started with angels and believing in angels. And I knocked that wall down. Once the angel wall was down, then everything else was easier than before. But it was like I kept seeing things about fairies. Like they just kept coming up. And the first time I was just like, that person's weird. Like, what a weirdo that they think that fairies are real. But I was really intrigued. And I couldn't, my curiosity kept like coming up over and over and over. Playing house. Thank you, Christine. We play house. That's exactly what we called it. That's funny. Okay. But yeah, the fairies kept coming up over and over and over again. And for me, it was Doreen Virtue, who I no longer follow. She's gotten on a totally different path now. But at that time, She was the one who kind of introduced me to them and just opened me up to that whole possibility of fairies. And I began to, this was the part that kind of confused me because I didn't really resonate with Doreen even at that time, but she was the only one I knew who talked about fairies. I didn't know anybody else who did. So she was the only one I could turn to learn more. But as I was listening to her, there would be things that would be like, well, that doesn't seem true, or there's another level to this. And it was awakening my own remembrance. And I didn't realize that at the time. I was just like, I don't know why I think this, because I know nothing about fairies. How can I have an opinion? But I was already I was tuning into my intuition a lot more at that time. So I had a knowing, I knew. And she came out with her fairyologist class, I don't know, maybe a year later or something. It was a while. And I had already gotten a lot more connected to fairies on my own, but I did the fairyologist course. And like the whole time, there were bits and pieces that I was like, she's not telling the whole story, or there's a whole another layer here, or like she was really skimming the surface and for me. But her purpose in doing all of this was to help awaken people to fairies being real and really staying within their comfort zone. So she wasn't getting into the nitty-gritty of it. She wasn't talking about what they really looked like. She was talking about interpreting their energy and stuff, which is good, but not what they really, really look like or how they really can act sometimes. So I had my own awakening to my own memories through doing a course with her and realizing that the bits and pieces that didn't resonate with me, and that, hey, like if I'm going to want the truth, I'm going to have to tune in myself. And that's when I really started going into nature. Every day I would go into nature and I would connect. And I learned to connect with the elementals and the fairies on that land that I would go to every day. And it was like a 5-minute drive from my house, because it was outside of town. I still go there. It's still my favorite place to go. And I would just go and I would just connect and just feel the energy. And I got to know the different elementals there, and understand, you know, who was who was good and who wasn't good, and who was a trickster. And so when I go there now, I've been going there for so long. Now when I go there, I just like open up to them and I'm just like, hey, I'm here. And, you know, it's just, I'm speaking in my head, but it's like I am projecting my thoughts out so that they hear it, because it's not like they just listen in on everybody's thoughts while you're walking around in the park. You know, like you have to like speak to them, and then they'll be like, oh, hey, like she's here. And so then some of them just stay in their own little spot of the forest, but some of them will come and greet me, and I'll have a conversation with them as I walk the paths there and stuff. But that was kind of my beginning for me. And after that, I did find some teachers, from some others that spoke about fairies in a way that was deeper. But for me, my journey has been a lot around finding my own truths when it comes to fairies and elementals. And, you know, we all use different words. It doesn't matter if you say fairy or elemental, it's whatever resonates with you. I just tend to say fairy and kind of want to cover everybody, because when I say elemental, I feel like I'm leaving some different beings out, or I'm keeping it to just, you know, the water, air, fire, earth. And I really spirit, and I want to really include all the different beings and the different ways that they look. And we can talk a little bit more about how they look in a little bit, but you guys are welcome to ask questions if you have questions come up as well as we go. So how did it come about for you?
Okay, so it's really funny because looking back now, I notice in my life that I have always been connecting to them, but I just never did it like consciously, because so when my dad and I went like on a trip or something, or like when we went to like stay in nature, because we would used to go like on vacation for 2 weeks to like live in a caravan and like with all of us. And then we went to like the little cities that were there. And I don't know why, but looking back, we could always like pick something, because there's 3 sisters, so we always got to pick something for ourselves, you know, because we never liked the same things. And it's so funny because looking back now, I actually always picked jewelry that had fairies on them. So I have so many jewelries that have fairies on them, and you can't even, I never wore them. Like that is the funny part. So I always bought them, but I never wore them. So they all look perfect. Yeah. And I actually do have like, I think it's like 6 parts of like jewelry that I know that I picked out when I was still like a child or like younger.
Yeah.
So that was like the first thing that came up for me after I learned that fairies are actually a thing in like the spiritual community. So when I read about it, I was like, that can't be. Like, how can I have felt always so connected to them? And like it's like that disbelief within yourself, you know, because like I always felt so connected to them, but there's also that part that says like, yeah, it's your imagination, and it's like you see them in the movie, so you're making this up, you know. And I think that they kind of wanted to prove me wrong. And that is when things started disappearing in my house, like small things, you know, like crystals and stuff. And like I never even noticed it until my favorite necklace disappeared, because it's this necklace actually. And it was a necklace that I got from my father at like this medieval town, and it was my favorite thing in the world, you know. As many of you know, my father has passed, so it was very important to me. When I always used to wear it like every 2 days or something, so I noticed it immediately when it was gone. And I looked for it everywhere, like everywhere. Like I even asked my friends where I went over, like, where is it? Where is it? And I could not find it for the life of me. I could not find it. When one day I came home with my mom, and she knew it was missing, of course. So I came home with my mom, and we were like at the porch, and like she was opening the front door when I was like, I wasn't even really into spirituality at the time, so I had just started opening myself up. When I was like directed to like look to the right of me, and I looked to the right of me, and there's like all plants over there. And you know, it's so funny because like there was my necklace. It was like carefully placed on a plant, and it was like hanging there, and I was like, what is happening? Like it was so mind-blowing. And I was like, mom, like look, do you think like it fell off? And she was like, no, it's hanging so perfectly. Why did you hang it like that? And I was like, I didn't do that, you know. So yeah, they definitely placed it somewhere where I would find it and like I would see it. So that's really funny because like right now I can like look back and say like, oh yeah, they were probably trying to get my attention to look. But in that moment I just didn't realize because I wasn't that far along. But yeah, since that moment on I was like, okay, like I can't ignore this any longer. I can't just shut my eyes for what has happened. So I actually started like building my own fairy garden, because as you know, I have a very big garden, and I started like, we have like this tree, and it's actually like, I don't want to say it's dead because it's like not dead, but it's also not like growing out, you know. So it's just like a stem, and I actually decorated it with like all of these small things, and like with my sisters, and like I did a whole thing where my sisters were like, what is a fairy garden? And at the end of the day they were like putting things in, you know. So that was really funny. Yeah. And like I even made like a plate that said like my fairy garden. And it's so funny because they don't believe it, but they still call that tree our fairy tree now, you know. So that was too funny because that was also the moment that I realized like, yeah, of course there are a lot of fairies here. Like we have such a big garden, there are so many plants and flowers and everything. So that is a moment where I really started to connect more with like the fairies in not only in my home but also in my garden, because I do know like our house is like very light, and like the doors are always open with the dogs and everything. So I do think that they pass through the house a lot also. So yeah, that was really funny. And then I met you actually, and then we did the journey together with the fairies, and that was actually the first time that I really connected to them in a way where I could see them in my mind's eye, you know, and where I really, because before I just tuned into, like you said, like the energy of them.
Yeah.
But when I did the journey with you, that was actually the first time that I was actually able to really see them in my mind. So yeah, that was really mind blowing to me, and like you have taught me so much on that front. So yeah, it was so lovely.
That's awesome. I have a little bit of feedback on the video. Is it okay for everybody else?
Yeah, of
Okay,
course.
it seems better now. I was trying to like pull back my energy, make sure I'm not just like sending it out. Pull it back. Can keep this connection. So that is really awesome. One thing that I have really found is that we really, by the way, hello, Melissa and Christine. I'll read your comment in just a minute. Um, we've talked about this before, but because we're talking about very specifically here, I want to talk about it again for anybody who hasn't heard it. We have this idea of what fairies look like based on what the media tells us, like in the movies that we watch, and even in oracle cards, a lot of the oracle decks and tarot and different things, they portray them as these really beautiful, shining, glittery, happy beings. And a lot of the energy there is accurate. So I'm not going to say that these cards are wrong. They're portraying the energy that they're interpreting. And fairies can look so many different ways. And they don't all have wings, and they're not all small. Some are big, and there are also different types. Like there are the she, which are like more like human sized or taller even. Or a lot of them are. There are so many different kinds of fairies when we use that word. Like it's almost like a very loose term for many, many, many different beings. And they often have like really, really long, thin fingers. Their proportions aren't human, like how we see proportions. Their proportions aren't necessarily the same. They can be more similar. Some of them can look more human and more proportional, but some of them aren't really, and some of them look a lot scarier and may have like really pointy teeth, or really sharp nails, or they just look scarier, I guess. Like we said this in a video before, if all of a sudden we all could see fairies with our physical eyes, people would run screaming that there's demons. Like not all of them are scary, but people would freak out, because it wouldn't be like the fairies appear and we're like, oh, look at the pretty fairies all around us. We'd be terrified. I mean, even I would probably be, to a certain extent. I mean, it'd probably just like take me a moment to gather myself and be like, okay, I'm just seeing them in the physical. I see them in my mind's eye all of the time, but just seeing them in the physical is a little bit different. But it's going to be jarring. It's going to be jarring. Well, apparently they're going to show themselves to us like physically. So I don't know, but it would be very, very jarring, like to just them physically be there, because we have to remember that they look different than what we may think they look. And the thing is when we're using our own imagination, or we're tuning into energy, or when we're tuning into the energy, then we can put what we think they look like on them, and that's how we will see them, because that's what's already there. That's what we can conceive or perceive. I don't know, conceive, because it's like what we can conceive, what we can actually wrap our mind around it. And so that's why we see them as these beings that are, beautiful, sparkly, tinkerbelly, whatever. And some people will see them more real than others. It just depends on how much you can let your own filters fall away, because it's your own filter that's keeping them looking a particular way. So that is the practice, and letting the filters fall to be able to see what is really, really there. And we also can't judge them by their appearance. We have to remember that just because they look scary doesn't mean that they're bad. Hello,
Yeah,
Lillian.
definitely. Oh, Lillian is here also. Oh, that's
Yep.
great. Yeah, I really resonated with you saying that actually, because I was in the forest earlier this morning, and when the fairies were actually, because you said like you say like fairies and like elementals to like get them all, you know, and that's too funny because I do that too. So when I enter the forest, I'm like fairies and elementals, so I can be like as broad as possible. And when I went in to meditate under a tree, it was really funny because there was actually fairies coming forward, and like there was this one specific fairy, and it didn't have wings, and that was really cool because it was like so small. It was amazing how small it was, because he was showing me that he actually has like a spider companion to like get him around and like to like get into the trees and everything. So they were like showing that they have like this little community where they like live in the trees and under things and stuff, and like how they move around with like having the animals as companions, you know. And it was really funny because like you said, like you wouldn't imagine fairies not having wings, you know. And it's funny because I said like, how can I explain what you kind of look like, because he was also naked, and that was like that was so funny because because he was like, yeah, you should draw me, and I was like, yeah, but people are not used to like beings being naked, you know. It's like such a human thing to have like clothes on. So that was really funny because he was like, yeah, but you can give me like armor that like looks like the bark from a tree. Like I would really love that if you would like paint me as a warrior type. So that was really funny. And he was also saying like, you can like describe us as like, do you know these little troll dolls that used to exist, like
Yep.
those
They're
small,
naked.
yeah, with like the funny looking hair. Like
Mhm.
he said, like you can compare it to that a little bit, like because they're so small and like they have like hair, but it's like not hair, it's like more like different when it different to every fairy, but it's like moss. It looks like moss a little bit, or like another one has like sprouts on his head, you know. So they are also a little bit like when they manifest in like our reality, they are like a little bit like adapted to like their surroundings. I have noticed sometimes. So yeah, that's really cool that you gave that example, because I was really like blown away by the fact that he would use a spider friend, you know, to like get around. Because like we always see like fairies like on like a bird or something, you know. Or like they would be, yeah, they would be brought together with like a bird, or like an animal that that we would look like as kind, and like that we would look like as positive, you know. Not a lot of people look positively at spiders, so I thought that was really cool. And I'm definitely gonna try to do a drawing of him, so in a couple of weeks I'll try to post it in the circle.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. And I think that that is really, really cool. And I think it's a really good example for sharing with people as well, because they can be, you know, itty bitty. So one thing that I have done in the past, or it's like automatic. So I moved to the Pacific Northwest in 2001. I was like 19 or 20 years old. And I grew up in South Dakota. So South Dakota does not have the lush greenery that we have here. And so, but I had been here to visit before. Like it wasn't brand new to me, but I'm still like in this, even though I've been here for like almost 20 years, every time I go in nature, I'm still like, oh my goodness, it's like this magical realm. It's like I walk into like this magical kingdom. So I see like this moss on the trees, like the trees just like covered in moss. And I'm like, and this is a whole fairy kingdom. And they all live, they have like the whole city on this moss right here. You know, so I do have a fairly good imagination. And but I could just like almost see it, you know. So the whole, like, I really resonate with him, you know, having a spider companion and being able to get around on the spider, because we often see them like flying on birds or on butterflies or dragonflies and stuff like that. But yeah, So I have a fairy that is coming in, and she's actually one that lives at the park that I go to that's out of town. And I've been seeing her for quite a few years. She's not chatty. She doesn't have a lot to say, but she just wants me to talk about what she looks like because for some reason it's important and it kind of shows you the contrast and difference there. So she's a little bit taller than above my knee. So she's about fairly large being, not itty bitty. And she has like a lot of, like, you look at her and you think of like a crone, and like she's older, she's more squat and round, and she's very old looking, and she has like a stick, like a staff that she uses to walk around, hobble around. And she lives in a particular part of that forest there. And I met her, the first time I met her, I was bringing an offering. So there's a tree that was in this clearing in the middle of the forest. And the top of the tree fell off, like it broke off. So now there's a trunk, but the trunk is like a little bit taller than I am, the top of it. But there's another tree, or maybe the top part of the tree, that's laying on the ground. So you can climb up on that part of the tree and get to the top of the trunk. And I just use that as an altar, and I'll leave gifts there. So I was leaving gifts there, and I was like setting my intentions and connecting with the fairies when she had stepped forward the first time. This was probably like 4 years ago or something. I'm not sure, but it was a while ago. And now like I see her all the time when I go and I greet her, but she doesn't have like a lot to say, but she is more of like, she's like a grandmother of that forest. She's a grandmother of like a grandmother energy, and that, you know, she's like the nurture of the other fairies in that forest. And like that, she's not like a boss, but more like she just like cares for them, and you know, and if they need like companionship, or they need like help with something, or if they get hurt, like she's there to like help them, like if they broke a wing a little bit. So she has like a lot of like medicine energy, like being that medicine woman type. But she just looks very different in that sense, that she just looks like the, you know, this very, very short grandmother. Her ears are not normal human ears. Her ears are definitely different, and her arms are a little bit longer, I think, than what would be like we would consider, you know, human normal. But otherwise, she's just very like I said, she's like just a little taller than my knee, but very round, very round. But she's just one of them that I connect with there, and one that I see the most clearly.
Yeah, it's too funny that you actually mentioned the offerings, because I actually didn't bring anything because I kind of forgot. I wasn't awake that long. So, and I was in the forest and I was like thinking like, oh yeah, I didn't bring you guys anything. And they were like, oh, that's okay. And then I started like connecting with them and like walking through the forest. And I forgot about the offering for a minute, you know? And the thing that I love about fairies is that they keep me really in the moment, and they have like a really playful energy. So there were like how do you call it in English? Like there were like things falling from the trees and like right beside me, you know? And it's like when it happens one time, I don't notice, but when it happens like 4 times on like my walk, I notice like, okay, they're trying to play, you know, they're trying to lighten up my energy a little bit, and like really try to make me laugh. Like that is something that came forward for me. Like we're really trying to get you to laugh because you could really use it within this moment. And I was walking and my energy was a little bit more uplifted, and I was walking when I suddenly saw like this like little tomato on the track that I was walking. And I was like, oh, you already have like a couple of offerings here, you know, because it was like a part that is like really separate. So it was like, how did it come here, you know? And they were like, yeah, you know, you can take that one, and maybe then next time when you come visit, you can take a piece of melon for us. And I was like, oh, is that something that you would like as an offering, like a piece of melon? And they were like, yeah, we want melon. And I was like, that is so funny, because like I can't even make it up, you know, because I was thinking like, yeah, if I would have thought it up myself, I would have brought like little fruits, because like in my head I know like they're small, so I would have brought little fruits. And I'm like, but a like a big slice of melon, like, is that gonna work for you guys? And they were like, yeah, we'll make it work, we'll make it work, and like we'll divide it between all of us. And I was like, yeah, why do you guys want melon? And they were like, yeah, that's something that we never find in the forest. Like, it would be so hard for them to go out and like get a piece of melon. And I was like, yeah, I would love to do that, you know. They probably also knew that I really like melons, so they knew to like suggest it to me, that I would be possible, like that I would be bringing it. So yeah, I really loved that. I was like, that just came out of nowhere, you know, like a piece of melon.
That's awesome. And I think that there's that, that good reminder there that, they like all different kinds of things. And the size doesn't really matter because they're taking the essence of it anyway. So it's not like they're physically gonna take it. And so when you bring it, then they can each get their portion of it through the essence that they're receiving. So I had a fairy at my old house that lived, he lived like in the area of my tree in my front yard. And he liked me to bring him banana smoothies and cookies. He really liked cookies too. And so he loved the banana smoothies though, but it was really funny because I would bring him these different offerings, and then for a little while I don't know what was going on, but I always forgot about it or something. And I was on a call with one of my friends, and she's very intuitive, and she was like, there's this little guy showing up and he's like telling me to tell you to bring him some more cookies and a banana smoothie. And I'm like, oh yeah, I have been kind of bad about bringing him to. He's like going to her and telling her to tell me, because I was so wrapped in my own little world. I wasn't paying attention. So they do like lots of different things, and they like sweet things a lot of times. And like you had mentioned that, a lot of times they are like really cheery, like playful, and they can be like a little trickstery, like they can get a little bit like trickster. They're not necessarily going to be bad, but anytime that we're working with fairies, it's really important to have, like any being, but fairies, they're not all for our highest good to connect with. So it's always important that we're setting that intention, and we're not just connecting with any of them, but just those that are for our highest and best good, that are of the highest integrity. So anytime one connects with you, like feel them out a little bit, kind of find out what their integrity is and what they're there for. And because they can be kind of trickster-y, they can find ways in, and I don't want anybody to be afraid to connect with them. It's just having an awareness and knowing that not all of them are for your highest good. The more you practice, the more you will know. It just becomes more natural to just know. So it took me a little while to get to that place of where I just knew, or when I knew that I needed to tune in deeper or ask my own guides, is this for my highest good to connect with this being? Because even at the park that I go to, and a lot of them that I know, a lot of them that I do know aren't for my highest good to actually work with or communicate with extensively. They're there to do a job. They're not bad. They're just not, their place of integrity is different than my place of integrity. We have different intentions and different roles in the world. So that's why it's important. It's not that they're bad, it's just that they're not necessarily for they can pull you kind of off of where you were meant to be on your path, or distract you, or they can offer you power. I've had this happen. There's a being, she is a fae being, but she is all about like offering power to people, and hey, like I'll give you this power and you couldn't be like the most powerful person. The thing is that yes, we need to remember our power, and there are beings that can help us remember our power, but she's offering us power from outside of ourselves, and then it's not for the highest good. Plus you can tell her power that she's offering is not power of the highest good. It's more of, it's just a different kind of power, like it's not power from living in alignment with your soul. It's power in taking over the world power, like it's the wrong kind of power. It doesn't feel right. So I had a connection with her. Actually, she likes to come up when I'm in that park as well, and she is a very well-known fae. And when she had come in the first time, I was very confused because my higher self and her are, I could hear / feel them communicating like sisters, like they were fighting. And I was like, what's going on? This is confusing. This is weird. But my higher self was like, you need to be very conscious and aware and not just let her into your energy, because I was like so curious. I just wanted to connect with her. And then a couple years later, she came in again in the same spot, and my higher self and her once again kind of had their little quabbles together. And then I just told her, I'm not gonna connect with you. I don't want that kind of power. Like, I will remember my own power. I will be in my power, not power outside of me. But then she got through to another fairy who came to me, and that fairy was in integrity, but they were just relaying a message to me, and they wanted to give me a gift. Well, the gift was from her, and I figured that out, and I didn't receive the gift because I knew that it wasn't for my highest good. So that, I'm just sharing that because I think that most of these things happen when you're like more deeply in the energy, and it's more like for me, it's been a lot of like, I'm supposed to learn these lessons so that I'm able to teach other people these lessons, and to teach people to have an awareness of the different energies and how they can be kind of confusing, because we do, not all energies, not all Fae being energies are happy, cheery. So like the Morrigan, if she comes in, and she's a goddess, I know, but when she comes in, is offering you power, but she's offering you power that is your own power, helping you feel your own power and remember who you are. So it's a different energy, but it can still feel, she's more of a shadow type feeling goddess instead of the light, fluffy love energy. She's power, but more like feels more of that shadow power. So it is like really interesting navigating these different energies and interpreting it and what they mean, because the darker energies aren't necessarily bad energies. It's just, it feels different. You have to be able to learn to interpret the different ones, and it takes practice.
Very true, very true. I actually want to share one more thing, and then I think we should go over the comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, you were thinking the same.
Yep.
So it's actually funny that something came into my awareness, and they were like, okay, talk about it. So I already told you, of course, when we meet, that I have started growing some plants, or like, how do I say it in English? Like fruits and vegetables,
Yeah.
in like this little spot on my in my garden. And yeah, I told you that I would really like to have like a greenhouse so I could do all of those things. And it's really funny because they recently started to really like grow. So this is the first year that I'm having like carrots and like strawberries that are popping up and stuff. So it's really cool. And also like mint and stuff. Yeah. And I had like the fairy tree garden. You remember me from before? And it was so funny because I had some trinkets that I put into the tree, but we had to cut it down this year because it was really, there was something, and it was like the placement was not good, and my mom wanted to change the garden up a little bit, so it actually went down, but it was like overtaken by some other plants, so it wasn't really getting room. So it was better to like cut it down before it like fell off and like in our garden or something. So but I was like, oh my god, that's my fairy tree, and I was like, well, how can I connect now? And until a couple of weeks ago, I actually found a trinket in my fruit and vegetable garden, like a trinket that was actually in like the fairy tree. But the funny thing is that I took everything out before we cut it down. So that was really weird because it was like this little like how do I say this? Like it was like a sitting place. I had like this little chair, like this little lovely chair. I don't know why that I put it in there, but it was too funny because it showed up in like my plants, and I was like, oh, so this is like the fairies like letting me know like, hey, we're here like taking care of your fruits and vegetables. And like I was wondering, like, why are the birds not eating my strawberries, you know? And it's really funny that that is their way of like showing, like, yeah, we put that there for you to give you that reminder that we are helping with that, you know, and we are here. So when they really start growing, I'm actually gonna use a couple of them to like bring offerings back to them. So it's like the co-creation of us offering things up to each other, you know.
Yeah.
um, and it's also funny that you mentioned that they give you gifts, because when I was in the forest this morning, there were some fairies that came up and they actually gave me a flower, but like an energetic flower. And that was actually like the first time that that happened for me. So it was really cool when you started mentioning it, because I was like, oh my God, I had that this morning. And it was like the first time that they said, like, it's okay, but we have a gift for you. So here's a flower, you know? So that was really amazing.
That is awesome. I love that a lot. And they do, you know, when they want to give us something, they will. And the thing is they read our energy. The instant they meet us or see us or know us, they know our integrity. They know if we have good intentions and if we truly care about the planet and all of that. So, you know, if they don't like us, they're not going to give us stuff. They're not going to offer to, you know, come around us or to work with us. So it's definitely like it goes both ways, you know, that connection, it goes both ways.
Yeah, definitely. And I do feel like they only like work with people that like respect them and show them love. So when fairies show up in readings for me, that always gives me like that vibe of like, oh, okay, there are fairies working with her. So that means that she really respects nature, you know, and that she really connects to nature and like is really kind. Actually, that's something that comes up a lot for me when I see fairies surrounding people, even if they're not consciously working with them yet.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you definitely can get a lot about somebody, like if they have fairies around them and the energy that the fairies have that they're carrying or the ways that they're working with them. You definitely learn a lot about that person that way, just because you know that they wouldn't be there if they didn't have that particular energy. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so we have some comments. It looks like Christine said, besides making a fairy garden and leaving them gifts, how can I connect to my fairy guides and other elemental spirit guides I have? So this is actually a really good question. So one thing that I want to talk about first is that when we go out in nature, we can connect with fairies and elementals and nature spirits and whatever other things you want to call the different beings that are there. And some of them can be very helpful and amazing teachers for us, but we also have um, we can have them as spirit guides. So that means that you don't necessarily have to go in nature in order to connect with them. And that's when you connect with them in meditation, through an altar that you may put up in your room, through if you're connecting with like more of the water one. So if you're connecting with mermaids or some other water energies, because there is a lot of different ones, then maybe in the shower, or you can get like a bowl of water. But meditation, I guess, I would say is the number one way, because you want to you need to open up that space and that time for them to come in. And a lot of times that's the thing that we don't do. We don't actually allow that connection. But it does help to also go into nature, just because when we're in nature, we're more grounded, we're more present, we're able to receive, or more open to receive, and especially when we're connecting with the different fairies and elementals. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so you actually already said it in the beginning, talking to them. So I actually started talking to them before I even started connecting with them. So really making them a part of your life, even though you're not seeing them yet, is really a big thing, I believe, because then they feel that kinship with you. So I think that's a really big one. And like showing gratitude, if like if you have fairies in your house, and they're definitely taking care of like your house plants and everything. So every time that I water my plants, I thank the fairies that are working with me, even though I don't necessarily tune into which fairy is working with me in that moment for my plants. Although I know it's of course for my greatest and highest good and for my house plants, because it's most of the time it are the same ones. But I do also thank them for taking such good care of my plants, or I ask for their help. You know, if I notice that one plant is not doing so good, I will call upon them and be like, hey fairies, like, can you assist me in helping this plant, because they can do other things than we do, of course.
Yes, absolutely. I do agree with that a lot. That's definitely one thing I would say is just like communicate with them, talk to them, let them know that you believe, that you're taught, that you know that you care, and it's nurturing that relationship. You know, if the thing is our society is action, go 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 go, do, and never taking enough time to sit and be. So even if it's a sort of meditation and watering your plants and just being like, hey, thank you for taking care of my plants and thank you for the work that you do, like that helps. But also, like when I go in nature, I do this and I'll just be like,
Yeah.
oh, I love you, tree. You're such a beautiful tree. Thank you for cleaning the air. And that's like building a connection with that tree spirit. And like I'll do that with other plants. I'll see like a flower or I'll see some other plant. And remember, all of these have a spirit in them. Like they are a being. Like all of them feel a little bit different, but they all have an energy and an essence, a personality. You know, they all have something there. So when you connect with them, you purposely connect with them, whether you are interpreting that energy or not, you are opening yourself up to being able to interpret that energy the more you do it. So if you go, so there's a tree, I call it my dragon tree. And this tree, when I connected with this tree a few years ago, I was given visions through this tree of our past lives together. But this tree spirit had lived in other trees. And this tree had also been a dragon. And I'm just like, I'm so confused. How does this even work? And I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to trust in this and go with it. So this tree spirit had been a dragon with me in a past life, but it had been a tree in a different life. And in a different life, it had taught me a lot of different things. And I only remember a little bit right now. Like I know as a little boy, and it had these enormous roots, and I would play on the root system. And I was like, I'm still like always obsessed with like the roots of trees, especially trees where you see their root system. And I'm always like it's the most magical thing to me. Like it is some kind of like activates some kind of memory of the root systems of trees, and it's just so magical to me. So this tree though gives me visions if I allow myself to open up and I allow myself enough time to do it. And this tree actually sits in the park, so there are people that walk by, and I always feel a little bit weird because I'm like hugging the tree and my forehead against it, and I'm just like you know, I'm full on like I'm open to receive. But the tree has a arm, like it's not quite a root, it's above ground, but it has an arm, and then it has what looks like claws. And that's why I was like, what is going on? Because this tree has a dragon arm and hand. And that's how what was supposed to like attract me to that tree and know that that tree was for me to connect with and receive and give, you know. So that tree is who I go to at my lowest. So when I met that tree like maybe 3 years before my divorce. So I was going to my tree like almost every single day, meditating, connecting with it, received lots of information, got lots of healing. I learned a lot from the tree. I still learn from this tree. But when I was going through the most difficult times, I was going through my divorce and leading up to my divorce, and after my divorce, I actually had to leave, and I was gone from the state for like a little over a month. And when I came back, one of the first places I went was to my tree, and I was just like, I missed you so much. Please hold me. Please hold me. It's like going to my mom. Mommy, just rock me. You know, like that's kind of how it feels. Like just comfort me. So I went to my tree for him just to hold me, and I do perceive him as a masculine energy. But it is really like interesting how much we can connect with these different, like he is a tree that is physical, but he is a major support and major guide and remembrance awakener and activator for me. So our guides can be in our physical world as well as in the spirit world.
Girl, that was too funny when you said that about the tree because I can't even, like, we can't make this up, right? Like, when I was walking in the forest this morning, I suddenly heard, like, I could really use a hug. I could really use a hug. And it was like this tree that was calling me to hug it. And I was walking towards it to hug it. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I was like standing there. And out of the corner of my eye, I see like people come in. And I was like, oh no, that must look like so weird. Then I'm like this girl alone in like this forest, and I'm like hugging the tree, you know? So that was too funny when you started mentioning it because I felt like a little bit like shame, and like in that moment I was like, I have nothing to be ashamed about, you know? So I love that you brought that forward, all that story. I really loved it. Oh, I did.
It's kind of funny, actually. They're showing me another thing that they want me to talk about, and I feel like we're getting a little bit long here, so I'm going to try to make it quick. But they're by my tree. I was by my tree I guess it was in the spring of this year, and we were in total lockdown mode, but I could go to the forest. So I would go to the forest. I would sit with my tree, and I was there and I saw this frog, and it was like there's a little gravel path there, and the frog was on the path, and oh no, I went to walk away from the tree and I almost stepped on the frog, and I stepped back and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I almost stepped on you. And the frog started hopping away, and I knelt down and I just like started talking to the frog. Well, the frog had been hopping away, and all of a sudden when I kneel down and start talking to it, it turns around and it hops back to me, and it stops right in front of me. And I had this conversation with this frog, and there's a fairy that is like a fairy and this frog are companions. And like I'm seeing that really clearly now. I didn't understand that at the time, but this frog just like sat there, and we like talked to each other, like we communicated. Like the frog doesn't like talk, but like we communicated, like we had this exchange of information somehow. Like it was different, like you know how it is kind of talking to animals, but a frog has like a very small brain, so I guess how they communicate maybe even different from other animals. But like I'm like, do you want me to help you somewhere? And do you want me to touch you? Do you want me to leave you alone? And the frog like very clearly wanted me to touch his back but not pick him up. And so I'm like sitting there petting a frog, and I hear people coming around the corner, and like they're gonna come and they're gonna think I'm like this crazy person sitting here talking to a frog, like literally petting a frog. And they come around the corner, and so I look up at them, and I go to look back down at the frog, and the frog has disappeared, like literally disappeared. And we're on a gravel path. I don't know where the frog went. Like it literally disappeared. It was no longer there. And I had like barely glanced up. Like it wasn't enough time to hop away. I'm still like, where did this frog go? Like
Oh,
it
that's so
disappeared into the other
cool.
realm.
Oh, you were saying that, and I was like, in my head, it was like jokingly like saying like it was hopping dimensions, you know? So
Yep.
that was so cool when you said that.
Yeah, it was like crazy, but this is the kind of stuff that happens to me. And like I have so many different stories. I have a gnome story when I physically saw a gnome for the first time, like with my physical eyes, like about had a heart attack. But it just was like I was startled like that. But yeah, I mean it is amazing. And I think, this just tells you that, it took me a long time to get to this point. I went into nature every day. I sat with my tree every day. I allowed every day. Well, not every day, because there were days I was having a bad day and I couldn't get out of my head. And I was just like in my head the whole time I was at the park, but I would still keep returning, and I would go back and I would tune in. I would connect. I would be available to receive. I would be open to whatever they wanted to bring in. Now, one thing that I do, that because I always forget to bring stuff when I go into nature for offerings. So I bought crystal chips, so little pieces of crystals that come in a little bag, and I have another little bag, and so I got a whole bunch of different kinds of crystals, and then I have some bigger ones too, and I put them in the bag, and I keep that bag in my purse, which is a backpack. So I always have my backpack with me when I go into nature, because I can put my water in there and everything. So then I can take out the little tiny bag, and when I'm walking, I know, oh, I need to leave a gift here, or I feel called to leave a gift here, and I'll leave a crystal or two, or sometimes almost a whole handful. It's like not a big handful, but quite a few, and I'll leave them in different places. So I try to find like that spot that feels right. So sometimes it's on a leaf, like the leaf is like the altar or the bowl, or it might be like the top of a tree stump, or in a crook of a branch on a tree. And I just leave them in all these different places. Sometimes higher up, sometimes on the ground. I try to always remember to leave some on the ground because some don't get up high very well. So yeah, that's kind of what I do for bringing gifts. It seems to be what works for me, because then I don't have to like remember to bring something. I always have something.
That's a real good one, because I actually forgot about the fact that I used to do that before you started mentioning it. And I also want to say, before we go back to the comments, you guys, yesterday Lalantia posted something, and she asked to post pictures of nature. So you should go take a look at that post, because I actually posted a photo of the willow tree in my backyard, and I actually took a photo of it with like a little crystal in the middle, and it's a crystal that I put there, of course. But when you take a good look at the picture, and let me know if I have to circle it, but you can actually see the deva that is guarding that tree, and it's really cool because I already posted it once when I just joined, but it's really good to see it underneath the post, so you can definitely find it. And it's really cool because I never saw her until I took that picture, and that is just to show how sometimes we are waiting for such a specific connection that we don't see the bigger picture in that moment. And afterwards, when I posted it in the sorcerer's circle, I saw her face appear, and I was like, how did I miss that? Like in that moment, I didn't see it, but when I've been looking back at the pictures, I saw it so clearly. So definitely go check out that post and have a look.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a really good point. Of sometimes you're looking for something that's like really, we think is going to be really obvious, or we're looking for a specific thing, and we're not allowing ourselves to see these other things that are already all around us, and we're just like blind to it because we've been walking by that tree every day for 20 years or whatever it may be. So yeah, I love that.